So today, I'm gonna be giving you 10 tips to grow big, beautiful spinach. Okay. Now, as a beginner, you'll hear people planting spinach, in the middle of the summer, and they say, "Well, how come my spinach isn't growing? How come the seeds haven't sprouted?" Well, if you live somewhere where your summers are hot, that's the wrong time to plant your spinach. So that leads me to number one. You want to direct sow your seeds when night temperatures are below 55 degrees and a time of the year where the daytime highs are not exceeding 72. Now, ideally, what I've noticed is you may have to have that temperature down to 50 degrees or even below that in order for the spinach to germinate. Okay. Now, the type of spinach you grow, it really doesn't have an impact. All spinach will grow as long as the temperatures are right. Okay. And now, when I said the temperature shouldn't exceed 72, that's on the higher end. You really want those temperatures to be between 50 and 65. Okay. Now, if you're in a sunny location where you have your spinach planted, then you may want to kind of consider where you have your spinach planted, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Now, number two, so if you are in a warm climate, you can start your spinach seeds in trays in the refrigerator. So typically, like I said, you're gonna need cooler temperatures in order to get those seeds to germinate, and they'll even germinate in 40, 45, sometimes even in the high 30s. So if you keep your refrigerator, somewhere between those temperatures, you'll be able to germinate them. Okay. Now, if you're somewhere where it's warm, you may have to take it into the garage, put the air conditioner on or a fan or something to keep the temperatures cool, and you can use grow lights in order to germinate them, but we'll talk about that later too. Okay. Now, I know I said that if you're in a warmer climate, try the refrigerator method, but it may or may not work for you. And another thing I want to add to that is spinach does not like being transplanted much, and this is why I said you should direct sow them. If not, you can do the method that I do. I like to use buckets because that way I can control the temperature of my spinach. So if it gets too warm, listen guys, I'm in Indiana. You never know what kind of weather you're going to get. Tomorrow it can be 90 or tomorrow it can be snowing. So that's kind of what I deal with here. And so to avoid that, I always plant my spinach in buckets. That way I can control, their temperature climate. Now, when the temperatures are, 50 and below, even during the day, let's say it's 32 degrees or below, spinach will still survive as long as you have it mulched properly. Okay. Number three, plant seeds about 1 inch apart. I find that the more spinach seeds you have, the better produce you're gonna have. And like I said, you want to plant them about 1 inch apart. You don't want to do 6 inches apart. Spinach grows well in kind of a crowded area. They'll thrive as long as you're fertilizing them regularly, and we'll talk about that later. They're gonna do just fine. They just like growing together. It's kind of like they like growing as a team. So if you plant 1 or 2 seeds 6 to 12 inches apart, you may or may not have a good spinach plant. So I'm just gonna let you know that now. Okay. Now, number 4, let's talk about sunlight. I would love to just say you want to plant your spinach in direct sunlight. Ideally you do, but again, it's a temperatures game, guys. So you want your spinach in direct sunlight when those daytime temperatures are in the 60s. Again, If it's 65, that may be okay, but that may even be a little bit too much. So it all depends on your temperature. Now, if your daytime highs are going to be in the low 70s, I would, take my bucket and bring it on the side of the house where it's going to have some shade, where it could get partial sunlight, so maybe 4 to 6 hours during the cooler part of the day in the morning. And then as the afternoon arrives, you want that shade to start to kick in. Now, if you're somewhere where you may have temperatures in the 70s and 80s, might want to bring that spinach indoors, maybe in the garage in a cool spot, or wherever the coolest area in your house is. And if the coolest part of your area is even warm, maybe put a fan or do something to help keep the temperatures cool. All right, so that's number 4. Number 5, you want to fertilize your spinach every 10 days. And you guys know what I use. I use this fish fertilizer. Now, this time of the year, I don't know if you'll be able to find it in Walmart, depending on where you are, or Meijer. So for me, like I went into Walmart and Meijer today, they didn't have anything gardening, but that could be where I am. So I'm in Grow Zone 5B. Typically, people here aren't growing anything past, I would say, August. There was even a guy that asked me January this year. He was like, "Why are you buying all this gardening stuff? It's not gardening season." I'm like, "It's always gardening season." So whatever you have to do to keep your garden thriving. Like for me, I'm notorious for growing crops indoors. I'm notorious for growing them in greenhouses. Like for me, I don't let the weather dictate when I'm gonna grow my food for myself and my family. Okay, so again, you want to fertilize every 10 days with a fertilizer that you know is going to be impactful. Okay, number 6, plant onions and garlic around your spinach to keep the pest pressure down. This time of the year, the insects and the different rodents are really starting to kind of pick up because they're going into hibernation. In fact, our biggest problem, which were chipmunks, they've already started hibernating. We've already been in the 30s at night here, and we just started October. So again, our first frost day is going to be this weekend. We got 2 in a row. So things are moving really quickly here in Grow Zone 5B. And that's why I have my greenhouse ready to go. I've got certain parts of the house ready to go because I have to be ready to move quickly. Okay. Now also, to keep the pest pressure down, in the morning you can come out and spray them off with a water hose. As far as chemicals, I'm not, I don't recommend that anybody uses chemicals. But if you do decide to do that, make sure you know what these chemicals are, what they can do to your body, if they're cancerous or not. So just make sure you know what you're doing. Number 7, a great alternate for spinach is Swiss chard. Now, Swiss chard, it tastes just like spinach to me. And for those of you that are in hotter climates, Swiss chard will be a great alternate for you. Even for me in the summer, I go with Swiss chard. That way I can still, saute the Swiss chard just as I would do my spinach. So always use, similar crops that will produce in different parts of the seasons. Okay, so that's number 7. Number 8. So if you want the plants to last, again, bring them indoors with partial sunlight in the coolest spot of the house. We already talked about this. So don't just let them go to waste. To reiterate what I said before, they don't like to be transplanted, and they're very finicky. They have to have a certain type of temperature. I know I'm repeating myself, but if you want to have successful spinach that's growing, you have to abide by this, okay? So again, don't be afraid to bring them indoors. Set yourself up to where they're growing in pots or bags, some type of way where you can easily transport the spinach and get them in a climate that they need to be in. Because I'm telling you right now, if the temperature goes over 70 and they're in direct sunlight, they're gonna go to seed and it's gonna be very fast, okay? Spinach likes cool weather. It does not like warm weather at all. Number 9, if you bring them indoors, they would do great with grow lights. We kind of talked about that before. So any of you that are worried about not having the light that you need, they'll do good. And with grow lights, actually 2 years ago, I had spinach growing during the summer in my garage. It was nice and cool in there. I had the fans going. I actually was growing peas too in the garage. All it needed was grow lights. They never even saw actual sunlight. So grow lights are very good for spinach if you're going to grow them indoors, and again, keeping them in a cool area. Number 10, they don't need a lot of water, but they like loose, well-drained soil that retains moisture, okay? So from my experience, you know, clay soils, they'll grow as long as the soil is broken down really good, nice and loose. But I found, for me, the best results I've had is potting soil. Now, if you don't have potting soil, you can mix native soil with peat moss, mix it up really good, and you'll be just fine. So again, make sure the soil is loose so that those roots can really stretch out and they can grow together. Also, they don't have to be watered all the time. So, you know, one good, you know, deep watering in a week is pretty much all they'll need. And they'll be fine as long as it's soil that will retain the moisture. But again, guys, if you're growing the spinach in direct sunlight and the temperatures are going above 65, just dip your hand down in there, kind of see if it's dry or not, and, you know, just water, you know, as needed. So again, if you're somewhere where I am, like this time of the year, I don't water anything because it's cool outside. The rain that we have gotten like a week or 10 days ago, the moisture is still retained. So I don't, once September, the middle of September gets here, I don't water anymore. So from here on out, you can see the kale, you can see the collards, you can see the other plants we've got here. You can see the celery. No more watering. So that's one of the good things about being in the Midwest is you really only have to water your crops maybe about the end of May until like the middle of September. Otherwise, you know, it usually will rain a lot in the spring and the fall, so I don't have to water. But only in the summer I may have to water maybe a few times if temperatures are like near 100 degrees, and I mean, we've just been in a serious drought. Otherwise, guys, you don't have to do all the overwatering of your crops depending on where you are. Now, if you're somewhere like Phoenix or, you know, Las Vegas, where it's really hot and dry and the sun is just beaming, you may not have many trees and it may not be a cactus, you know, within a mile of sight. So just kind of, you know, pay attention to your crops, you know, notice how they react in certain weather, and then, you know, act accordingly. Well, that's what I have for you guys today. Hopefully these 10 tips will help you. Hopefully, if you're a beginner and your seeds are not germinating, hopefully you've learned something from this video. Otherwise, guys, that's what I got for you guys. Until next time, we're signing out. Peace.